Tonight, the impossible happened. In a single, merciless wave, the Islamic Republic of Iran unleashed hell upon the most fortified military position in the Middle East. 85 Ghadr ballistic missiles, each one a masterpiece of Iranian engineering and defiance, streaked through the darkness at over Mach 13 and smashed directly into the heart of Israel's elite, 143rd Division. Division 143, the Iron Spear guarding Gaza, has been devastated. Command centers obliterated, weapons caches vaporized, advanced fighter jets and tanks reduced to glowing wreckage. The estimated damage, a jaw-dropping $47.7 billion. And now, Jerusalem has gone deathly silent. No victory speeches, no thunderous threats of revenge, no emergency address from Netanyahu, not even a single word from the White House. Just silence. The terrifying silence of a legend being burned alive. This was not luck. This was not a lucky shot. This was a meticulously orchestrated saturation strike, a deliberate overload designed to shatter the myth of Israeli invincibility. The legendary Iron Dome, the Arrow 3, America's most advanced defenses, all drowned in a sea of Iranian steel and fire within 14 brutal minutes. Tonight, a regional power just humiliated a nuclear state fully backed by the world's superpower, and that superpower is nowhere to be seen. Its aircraft carriers remain thousands of miles away, watching helplessly as history is rewritten in flames. So tonight, we cut through the lies and ask the questions they don't want answered. How did Iran's homegrown missiles pierce the impenetrable shield? Why is America hesitating? What does this mean for the future of Western dominance? And is this the moment the unipolar world finally began to die? Iran wrecks 143rd Division base. 85 Ghadr missiles fired, $47. 7B damage. Jerusalem falls silent now. If you're ready for raw, unfiltered truth in a world drowning in propaganda, smash, like right now. Subscribe to Lawrence Wilkerson Daily and comment, "I'm awake" below, because tonight, the world changed forever. Let's begin. Let's cut straight through the fog of propaganda and examine exactly what happened on this historic night. At approximately 2:17 a.m. local time, the Islamic Republic of Iran initiated a large-scale ballistic missile operation, codenamed, according to regional intelligence sources, Operation True Promise 3, from 3 separate launch sites deep inside western and central Iran. A total of 85 Ghadr medium-range ballistic missiles were fired in coordinated salvos. The entire launch sequence lasted less than 8 minutes. These were not random launches. Iranian forces used a classic saturation attack doctrine, overwhelming the enemy's defensive systems with sheer volume while incorporating electronic warfare, decoy warheads, and maneuverable re-entry vehicles. The missiles flew on depressed trajectories, staying below 120 kilometers in altitude for most of their flight path, significantly reducing reaction time for Israeli and American early warning systems. Flight time from launch to impact between 12 and 14 minutes. The primary target was Israel's 143rd Division, also known as the Gaza Division, one of the most critical and heavily fortified formations in the Israel Defense Forces. This division is responsible for the entire Gaza border sector, including intelligence gathering, rapid response, and offensive operations into Palestinian territories. It houses forward command headquarters, underground ammunition depots, armored brigades, helicopter squadrons, and advanced surveillance infrastructure. The results were devastating. According to preliminary battlefield assessments and satellite imagery analysis circulating among independent military observers, at least 47 of the 85 missiles successfully penetrated the multi-layered Israeli air defense network. Multiple direct hits were recorded on the underground divisional command bunker, primary fuel and ammunition storage facilities, long-range radar and electronic warfare arrays, Apache helicopter maintenance hangars, and Merkava tank staging areas. The scale of destruction is unprecedented in modern Israeli military history. The Central Command Complex, built to withstand conventional strikes, suffered catastrophic structural failure. Secondary explosions from ignited ammunition and fuel depots continued for over 2 hours after the initial impact. Entire motor pools of advanced armored vehicles were turned into scrap metal. Communication nodes were silenced, leaving Israeli forces in the southern sector temporarily blind and deaf. Damage assessment teams are still working, but conservative estimates already place material losses at 47.7 billion US dollars. This figure includes not only destroyed equipment and infrastructure, but also the long-term cost of relocating forces, rebuilding hardened bunkers, and replacing high-value assets. Some analysts suggest the real economic impact, when factoring in disrupted operations and emergency mobilization, could exceed 60 billion. What makes this attack particularly humiliating for Israel is how it exposed the limitations of its much celebrated defense systems. The Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow, three systems that have cost taxpayers tens of billions over the past 2 decades, were simply overwhelmed. When faced with a high-volume, high-speed ballistic missile barrage, even the most sophisticated interceptors reached saturation point. Israeli commanders were forced to choose which threats to engage, and many Ghadr missiles slipped through the gaps. Iranian tactics demonstrated sophisticated planning. They timed the strike during a period of reduced readiness, used terrain masking, and combined the ballistic barrage with reported drone swarms that acted as both distractions and additional strike platforms. This layered approach forced Israeli defenses to divide their attention across multiple threat vectors simultaneously. Casualty figures remain heavily censored by Israeli authorities. Official statements speak only of limited damage and several injured, but multiple Arabic language intelligence channels and on-the-ground reports from southern Israel describe significant personnel losses, including senior officers. The psychological shock to the IDF cannot be overstated. This was not a border skirmish. This was a direct, deep strike on one of their most important forward commands. For the first time in modern history, a non-nuclear regional power has conducted a successful massed ballistic missile assault against the Israeli military's core infrastructure and lived to tell the tale without immediate catastrophic retaliation. This single night has rewritten the military equation in the Middle East. The era of absolute Israeli air and missile superiority has ended. The myth of an impenetrable fortress has been shattered by Iranian engineering, strategy, and sheer audacity. The silence from Jerusalem is not mere caution. It is the stunned quiet that follows when a nation realizes its defensive doctrine has just been proven obsolete in real time. Now let's move beyond the smoke and flames to the real story of this night. The undeniable demonstration of Iranian military technology and self-reliance. The star of Operation True Promise 3 was the Ghadr ballistic missile, a weapon that has just proven it can rewrite the balance of power in the Middle East. The Ghadr, also known as Ghadr 110, is a medium-range ballistic missile developed entirely by Iranian engineers. It has a maximum range of approximately 1,950 to 2,000 kilometers, placing every major Israeli military installation comfortably within its reach. On this night, 85 of these missiles were launched in rapid, coordinated salvos. Flight time to target, just 12 to 14 minutes. Each Ghadr is roughly 16.5 meters long, weighs around 17.5 tons at launch, and carries a warhead between 650 and 1,000 kilograms. That payload can be a high-explosive conventional warhead, submunitions, or in theory other types. What matters most is its performance in the terminal phase. These missiles travel at speeds exceeding Mach 13 during re-entry. They employ maneuverable re-entry vehicles and depressed trajectories, making them extremely difficult for traditional missile defense systems to track and intercept. Accuracy is another Iranian success story. Independent estimates place the circular error probable of the Ghadr at between 30 and 100 meters. Impressive for a missile of this class produced under heavy sanctions. Several impacts on the night of the attack appeared to achieve near-direct hits on hardened underground facilities, suggesting the use of advanced inertial guidance combined with GPS-assisted navigation, possibly upgraded with domestic systems or indigenous alternatives. What truly sets the Ghadr apart is not just its technical specifications, but its origin. This is a 100% Iranian weapon, developed and manufactured inside Iran despite decades of international sanctions, export controls, and constant sabotage attempts. Iran did not buy this capability from Russia or China. It built it through its own universities, military research centers, and domestic industries. That is the definition of strategic self-reliance. Let's compare the economics, because modern warfare is as much about cost as it is about capability. A single Ghadr missile is estimated to cost Iran between $200,000 and $500,000 to produce. In contrast, Israel's layered defenses are enormously expensive. Iron Dome Tamir interceptors cost between $40,000 and $100,000 each. David Sling runs several $100,000 per missile. Arrow 3 reaches up to $2 to $3 million per interceptor. When Iran launches 85 ballistic missiles in a saturation attack, it forces Israel and its allies to fire dozens, sometimes hundreds, of these high-cost interceptors. Many analysts calculate that Iran can spend roughly $1 on offense while forcing its adversaries to spend between $10 and $50 on defense. This is classic asymmetric economic warfare, and on this night, it worked with devastating efficiency. The Ghadr also incorporates lessons learned from previous operations. Iran has continuously upgraded the missile family, improving propellant efficiency, reducing radar cross-section, and enhancing electronic countermeasures. Some reports suggest the latest variants include decoy warheads and terminal stage jamming capabilities designed specifically to blind Israeli radars. This attack exposed the fundamental weakness of Western-style missile defense against a determined, high-volume barrage. No matter how advanced the sensors and computers, physics imposes limits. When dozens of hypersonic threats arrive almost simultaneously, even the best systems become saturated. Israeli commanders had to make impossible choices about which threats to prioritize, and many Ghadr missiles simply got through. Importantly, Iran did not need to use its most advanced missiles for this operation. The Ghadr represents a mid-tier capability in Tehran's arsenal. The country also possesses longer range, more accurate and heavier payload systems such as the Sigil, EMAD, and Khorramshahr. The fact that Iran achieved this level of damage using the Ghadr sends a clear message. We have much more in reserve. This is what strategic autonomy looks like in practice. While Israel depends on billions of dollars in annual U.S. military aid and imported technology, Iran has built a domestic missile industry that can produce hundreds of ballistic missiles per year. Its scientists and engineers continue to innovate under pressure. The 143rd Division attack was not merely a tactical success. It was a technological and doctrinal statement. Iran has demonstrated that it can design, produce, and employ sophisticated ballistic missiles capable of striking high-value, heavily defended targets hundreds of kilometers away, and do so at a fraction of the cost of its adversaries' defensive systems. The myth of technological superiority has been challenged. The era in which Western-backed powers could rely on impenetrable shields while projecting force with impunity is coming to an end. Iranian engineering, Iranian determination, and Iranian self-reliance have just delivered a powerful lesson in modern warfare. Now we turn to the most revealing part of this entire episode, the response, or rather, the stunning lack of response from Jerusalem and Washington. In the hours following the Iranian strike, Israel's legendary policy of immediate and overwhelming retaliation simply failed to materialize. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not addressed the nation. The Israeli Defense Forces issued only a terse, carefully worded statement, admitting limited damage and a number of injured personnel while refusing to confirm the scale of destruction at the 143rd Division base. No emergency session of the War Cabinet has been publicly announced. Jerusalem has gone deathly quiet. This silence is deafening. For a country that has built its deterrence doctrine on the principle of instant, disproportionate response, the absence of action speaks louder than any missile barrage. Israeli officials are clearly still assessing the extent of the damage and, more importantly, calculating the catastrophic costs of escalation. The myth of Israeli invincibility has taken a direct hit, and the psychological impact on both the military and the public is profound. Now let's examine the American reaction, or the lack thereof. As of this moment, the United States has offered nothing more than the standard diplomatic platitudes. The White House released a brief statement expressing full support for Israel's right to defend itself and condemning Iran's unprovoked aggression. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held a short phone call with his Israeli counterpart. That is the extent of Washington's visible response. Militarily, America remains conspicuously absent. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, Washington's primary rapid response asset in the region, is currently positioned in the Indian Ocean more than 3,000 kilometers away from the theater of operations. No additional carrier groups have been surged into the eastern Mediterranean. No emergency deployment of THAAD or Patriot batteries beyond what was already in place. No visible increase in combat air patrols over Israeli airspace by U.S. farce. This hesitation is not accidental. It reflects deep strategic anxiety in Washington. First, U.S. planners understand the terrifying escalation ladder. Any direct American involvement risks triggering a full-scale regional war involving Hezbollah, Iraqi resistance groups, the Houthis, and potentially direct Iranian strikes on U.S. bases across the Middle East. The Pentagon has already wargamed these scenarios. The projected casualties and economic costs are enormous. Second, the oil factor. A wider conflict would send global oil prices skyrocketing toward $200 per barrel or higher. In an already fragile global economy, that would trigger immediate pain at the pump for American voters and could derail any hope of economic stability ahead of future political cycles. Third, and perhaps most important, America is increasingly aware of its own limitations. Decades of endless wars in the Middle East have drained both blood and treasure. The U.S. military is stretched thin across multiple theaters: Ukraine, the South China Sea, and now this. The uncomfortable truth is that Washington no longer possesses the unchallenged dominance it enjoyed in the 1990s and early 2000s. This episode exposes the hollow nature of America's security guarantees. For years, Israel has been told that the United States would always have its back. Yet when Iran launches a direct large-scale assault on Israeli territory, the superpower's response is measured, cautious, and deliberately restrained. The aircraft carriers stay far away. The rhetoric remains generic. The promised ironclad support suddenly looks very conditional. This is the new geopolitical reality. The United States is a superpower in decline, still powerful, still dangerous, but no longer omnipotent. It can print dollars, but it cannot print unlimited political will, unlimited interceptors, or unlimited tolerance for another Middle East war. The Biden administration finds itself trapped between two bad choices: abandon Israel and watch America's credibility in the region collapse, or intervene directly and risk igniting a conflict that could dwarf anything seen since 1973. Neither option is acceptable, so Washington chooses the third path: managed silence and behind-the-scenes diplomacy. This Iranian strike has done more than damage an Israeli military base. It has exposed the growing gap between American rhetoric and American capability. The era when Washington could dictate outcomes in the Middle East with a few phone calls and the movement of a carrier group is rapidly coming to an end. The silence from both Jerusalem and Washington is not strength. It is the sound of a fading order realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. Beyond missiles, radars, and dollars lies the most decisive factor in warfare, the human will. On this night, Iran demonstrated something far more powerful than technology, an unbreakable national spirit forged through decades of resistance. At its core, this conflict reveals a fundamental clash between two different sources of power. One side fights with borrowed strength, advanced weapons purchased with American money, intelligence shared by foreign agencies, and security guarantees written in Washington. The other side fights with internal strength, a deep reservoir of national pride, self-reliance, and conviction that their cause is existential. Iranian soldiers, engineers, and leaders do not fight for foreign aid or regional hegemony. They fight because they believe their nation is under siege, that their sovereignty and dignity are at stake. This is not abstract ideology. It is lived reality. For over 40 years, Iran has endured sanctions, assassinations, cyber attacks, and constant military threats. Yet it has not only survived, but steadily built its own independent military capability. That kind of endurance comes only from deep national will. Compare this to the Israeli side. The IDF has long relied on technological superiority and unlimited American backing. Their soldiers are brave, but their doctrine is built on the assumption that money and machines can substitute for sacrifice and resilience. When the Iron Dome fails and American carriers stay thousands of miles away, a quiet doubt begins to creep in. If our shield is broken and our patron hesitates, what are we truly fighting with? History consistently proves one uncomfortable truth. Technology without spirit eventually falters. Superior weapons lose their edge when the men behind them no longer believe in the fight with total conviction. The Vietnamese, the Afghans, the Hezbollah fighters in 2006 all demonstrated that determined forces with limited resources can humble vastly better equipped armies when the will to resist is absolute. Iran's missile program itself is a monument to this spirit. Scientists working under sanctions with limited resources managed to develop hypersonic capable ballistic missiles that penetrated the most advanced multi-layered defense system in the world. That achievement was not possible through money alone. It required creativity, patience, sacrifice, and an unshakable belief that their nation must stand independent. This is the true asymmetry of the conflict. Iran fights as a sovereign nation defending its soil and dignity. Israel fights to maintain an image of dominance sustained by external power. One side's strength is organic and renewable. The other's strength is imported and increasingly fragile. The silence in Jerusalem is not merely tactical caution. It is the stunned realization that their technological fortress can be breached by men who believe more deeply in their cause. When a nation is willing to build its own weapons under extreme pressure, endure decades of isolation, and still strike back effectively, it possesses something no amount of foreign aid can purchase: true national will. Tonight, Iran reminded the world that in the final analysis, spirit defeats steel when that steel is wielded without deeper purpose. The age of dominance through technology and money alone is ending. The age of nations willing to fight for their own sovereignty has returned. This was never just about one military base in southern Israel. What happened on this night represents a tectonic shift in the global order, the visible cracking of the unipolar world. For decades, the United States and Israel projected an image of unchallenged dominance in the Middle East. They operated under the assumption that American power, Israeli technology, and Western unity formed an unbreakable shield. That illusion has now been shattered by 85 Iranian missiles. The world has witnessed a regional power successfully striking a nuclear-armed nation backed by the world's superpower, and the superpower hesitated This single event accelerates the transition to a genuinely multipolar world. The axis of resistance, Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, is no longer a loose collection of partners. It is becoming a coordinated strategic bloc. Russia provides diplomatic cover and advanced systems. China offers economic depth and technological support. North Korea contributes battle-tested missile technology. Iran supplies the forward combat experience and ideological resolve. Together, they are systematically eroding the foundations of Western hegemony. Meanwhile, NATO and the United States find themselves strategically overextended. Washington's attention is divided between Ukraine, the South China Sea, and now a rapidly destabilizing Middle East. Its traditional allies are beginning to question the reliability of American security guarantees. When even Israel, America's most important partner in the region, receives only cautious words and distant carrier groups, the message is clear. U.S. power has limits, and those limits are becoming visible to the entire world. The economic dimension is equally profound. A wider conflict would send oil prices soaring, enriching Russia and Iran, while punishing Europe and straining the American economy. China, as the world's largest oil importer, is positioning itself to benefit from new energy arrangements with sanctioned producers. The global financial architecture, built after 1945, is facing its most serious challenge since the Cold War. This Iranian strike marks the beginning of the end of the rules-based international order, a phrase that always meant rules made in Washington. Nations that once feared direct confrontation with the West are now recalibrating their risk assessments. If Iran can do this and survive without catastrophic retaliation, what does that mean for other countries seeking genuine independence? The age of unchallenged American primacy is fading. In its place, a new balance is emerging, messy, competitive, and far more realistic. Countries are choosing sides not out of ideology, but out of cold calculations of interest and survival. The myth of Western invincibility has been pierced. The era of multipolarity is not coming, it has already arrived, and this night made it impossible to ignore. The silence from Jerusalem and Washington is not strategy. It is the sound of an old order realizing that its time is passing. The world will never look the same again. And so we reach the end of this historic night. What we witnessed was far more than a military strike. It was a turning point in modern history, a moment when a sanctioned, isolated nation demonstrated that determination, ingenuity, and national will can overcome the most expensive defense systems money can buy. The 143rd Division lies in ruins. Jerusalem remains silent, and the illusion of unchallenged dominance has been irrevocably broken. The old unipolar world is dying in real time. The era of one superpower dictating terms to everyone else is coming to a close. A new multipolar reality is rising, one where nations like Iran prove they can defend their sovereignty and strike back effectively, even against overwhelming odds. The question we must all confront now is this: how long can Washington and Jerusalem continue pretending that their era of absolute superiority still exists? How many more such strikes will it take before the world fully accepts that the balance of power has fundamentally shifted? I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe this marks the beginning of the end for American hegemony in the Middle East? Or do you think Israel and the United States will find a way to restore their deterrence? Be honest and respectful. The most insightful comments will be pinned. If this analysis cut through the propaganda and gave you clarity in a world full of lies, then do three things right now. Smash that like button. It helps spread the truth. Share this video with anyone who still believes in the old narrative. And subscribe to Lawrence Wilkerson Daily and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep, unfiltered breakdown of these historic shifts. The world is changing faster than the mainstream media wants you to know. Stay awake, stay informed, and stay with us. Thank you for watching. This is Lawrence Wilkerson Daily, where we tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.